having trouble picking out the lake that airport's near. That may be a bad sign of bad things. This is Highway 30. If I follow that, that'll get me close, but I need a cigar. Okay, you can just barely see the lake in this light. There's a lake it's near, I think. I'm going to, of course, do a full pattern now that's straight in, just to make sure I set up the altitude right. And the glide slope. Is that the lake? Okay, I'm going to put fuel back to both for landing, just in case. Fuel pump on. Cow flaps open. They are open. I never closed them, okay?
Too low terrain. Too low terrain. Too low terrain. Too low.
That's definitely the lake.
Too low terrain. Too low terrain.
I think I see the airport right there. I'm going to start on the upwind leg and do a full pattern.
Too low terrain. Too low terrain. Too low terrain.
Okay, I'm at power and altitude.
Too low terrain. 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 Too low terrain.
Even the buildings on the airport are hard to spot. I may not know till crosswind whether I got the right airport or not, but I think this is it right there, and that's what I got to land on.
Too low terrain. 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 Too low terrain.
It's in the right direction. It's east-west.
Too low terrain.
No point checking the ATIS. There's only one active runway, uphill and downhill.
Too low terrain.
Yeah, I see the asphalt of the runway. That's the airport. I got the airport.
Terrain. Too low terrain. Too low terrain.
It's hard to tell till crosswind whether you got the right airport or not, but there's the asphalt strip that's at the end of the runway. So I'm going to touch down there, then roll out onto the asphalt strip.
Too low terrain. 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 Too low terrain.
Definitely a full flap landing.
Too low terrain. Too low. Terrain. Too low. Terrain.
1 notch on downwind,
Too low.
1 notch on
terrain.
base, and 1 notch on final.
Too low. Terrain. 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 Too low. Terrain.
Tell me something I don't know, GPS. Tell me if I'm going to land safe.
Too low. Terrain. Too low. Terrain. Too low. Terrain.
I'm going to turn on the lane light and the taxi light just so I get better illumination.
Too low. Terrain.
Okay, base.
Too low. Terrain. 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 Too low. Terrain.
I lost the airport.
Too low. Terrain. Too low. Terrain. Too low. Terrain ahead. Pull up. Pull up. Pull up. Pull up. Terrain ahead.
I lost the airport.
Terrain ahead. Pull up. Terrain ahead. Terrain ahead. Terrain ahead. Pull up. 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 Terrain ahead. Pull
That was
up.
terrible.
Terrain ahead. Pull up. 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 Terrain ahead. Pull up.
I forgot to lean for best power. That could have been fatal. Okay, gotta leave myself more room for the base leg.
Too low. Terrain. Terrain ahead. Terrain. Too low. 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 Terrain. Too low.
I'm
Terrain.
losing daylight.
Too low. Terrain. Too low. Terrain.
There's the
Too
lake.
low. Terrain. Too 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 low. Terrain. Too
I'm gonna have to leave myself more room on the downwind for the base leg, so I get a good look at the airport on base leg, then turn
Too
final.
low. Terrain. Too low. Terrain.
I think my heading was off on downwind, I'm
Too
pretty
low.
sure.
Terrain. Too low. 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 Terrain.
That's the airport right there. I'll just go for
Too
it.
low. Terrain. Too
I'm
low.
burning daylight.
Too low. Terrain. Too terrain ahead. Terrain ahead. Terrain ahead. Terrain ahead. Terrain ahead. Pull up. Terrain ahead. Pull up. Terrain ahead. Pull up. Terrain ahead. Pull up. Terrain ahead. Pull up.
Something to
Terrain
slow
ahead.
down.
Pull up. Terrain ahead. Pull up. Terrain
Yep, this is
ahead.
definitely the runway. Believe it or
Terrain
not,
ahead. Pull up.
I definitely have the
Pull
runway.
up. Terrain ahead. Pull 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 up. Terrain ahead.
Not pretty, but he got down safe. Not pretty. That was weird. Okay, the rush is over. My next airport's lighted, and taking off is easier than landing in the dark. Hey, mags are okay, surprisingly. Fuel pump on, beacon light on, jet, but not land and taxi lights on, more illumination. Okay. Check for 300 RPM drop on the prop. Here goes nothing. That was hairy.
Terrain ahead. Pull up. Terrain ahead.
I made it. Hairy, but I made it.
Pull up. Terrain ahead. Pull up. Terrain ahead. Pull.
Okay, reduce the climb power. And I'm going to a nice lighted airport for my last airport. So no problem with the dark. It's such a short flight that I'll leave the landing light and taxi light on.